Welcome to another edition of the Young Kings podcast. And this one is to do with something I've been reading most recently on black violence. And it deals with black on black violence as a part of white supremacy. That is black people acting out their exclusion from Eurocentricity or white supremacy, and that presenting itself in terms of black on black violence, in terms of self-hatred and all of the negatives that come from our exclusion of a particular system that sees us in a particular way. And so there was something that I read that was quite pertinent to that. And it's something that I think we all need to think about as black people, and our young kings out there killing one another in search of self-esteem, in search of social visibility, in search of honour through the shaming of others, which is usually done through violent oppression, through conquering one another violently. And so an important thing that was highlighted in the book that I was reading was this, and it's quite simple, that black skin, broad noses, our physical characteristics, the African body, in and of itself doesn't create shame. It doesn't create shame. That's not the basis of inferiority. Okay? To have Afrocentric features, lips, nose, skin tone, in and of itself is not the origin of inferiority. Okay? It is the context, the social and cultural context that this physical body exists within. That's what we need to look at. Who has framed? So black skin and Afrocentric, the African body, in terms of it being perceived as inferiority, who has created that perception? What are the social conditions which have created that perception of inferiority, of dark skin, of Afrocentric features? What's behind that social context? Who has coded the African body as inferior? And when I say coded, the word discursive comes to mind, which essentially is the lengthy ramblings of Eurocentric scholars and of Eurocentric society. Okay? That's what I mean, the lengthy ramblings over and over again through various media, through academia, through various information, through the bombardment of information, the lengthy ramblings, Eurocentric ramblings on and on about the inferiority of the African body has created the social conditions that make dark skin and Afrocentric features as negative, present them as negative or inferior, or characteristics of inferiority. And that also links to the African mind, the way of thinking, the cultural origins of Afrocentricity. The basis is the same. Black cultural expression, language, body language, food, the things we like, music, the way we dance, our rhythm. All of these things are presented as negative, but that doesn't mean that they are inferior objectively, because we were all created by God. We are all creations of the Creator. We are not inferior. We are one part of the human race, and we are relevant. Every culture is relevant. So when we're looking and we're thinking, oh, our dark skin, oh, we need to straighten our hair, oh, our nose is broad, we're trying to change things. People are, especially in Jamaica, where people are bleaching their skin. You're doing that because the social context, the social dynamics of which you are a part, deems your dark skin inferior or a negative. But that is a form of Eurocentric oppression. That is a feature of white supremacy. That's the context. So you need to understand the power dynamics behind what is being framed as inferior. That's what you need to do. In and of itself, it isn't inferior. If you take away the Eurocentric context of society, you remove that, it suddenly ceases to be. And this is what comes back to African history and knowing African history. Because once you understand and you know African history and you understand the origins of African history, then you understand that there was a time when there was an African empire. Okay? When Africa in and of itself was referred to as the land of the gods because of the level of civilization, the high level of civilization that existed in Africa. People point to ancient Egypt, but it was really most prominent in the southern part of Africa. Okay? Not the north to begin with. It was southern Africa where the civilization was most rich and was most advanced. Okay? Because Egypt is part of Africa and all of Africa was black, including Egypt. When you look at the history of it, it is undeniable. There is incontrovertible evidence of that being so from multiple academic sources. Okay? Chancellor Williams being one of the most, who wrote the book, the destruction of black civilization. Okay? He's just but one source. Also, Professor Sheikh Anta Diop, who's written extensively on the subject. Cedric J. Robinson in Black Marxism, Professor Cedric J. Robinson writes of the idea, not the idea, but the fact that Africans were referred to as gods, and Africa was referred to as the land of the gods. That Herodotus, okay, the most sourced oldest European historian, clearly saying that ancient Egyptians had dark skin and woolly hair. Incontrovertible. So when you orientate yourself around the reality of history, not the Eurocentric dogmatic situation that's pushed on you, but you identify and you educate yourself to the history, you understand that at that time, black, dark skin, melanated skin was deemed the height of beauty. It was the pinnacle. It was actually light skin, white skin that was deemed as ugly at that time within the Afrocentric context of the African empire when Africans governed planet Earth with their civilization, and their civilization spread because African civilization is the origin of modern civilization in and of itself, which I know seems almost implausible to many within the current structure of European time. But we need to understand that we exist within European time, and the lengthy ramblings of Eurocentricity through the media, through academic texts, through various sources, control how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive African history. And that is important. We exist in African time. We exist currently in European time. That is the Eurocentric projection of the African past, the African present, and where the possibilities of where the African can go. All of these are framed in European time. We exist in European time. And our conception of time is structured through European oppressive regimes, white supremacy. That's what frames how we see our past, how we see ourselves now, and what the possibilities of how we see of where we can go. And that's what makes our skin tone and our characteristics seem inferior, because they are very specifically framed within a Eurocentric white supremacist context. It in of itself is not, and historically has not been. There has been a time when melanated black skin, brown skin, was the epitome of beauty. And so were African characteristics, framed within African time. When the African empire was in its ascendancy. So it is all contextual. And once you orientate your mind as to the reality of what's going on and you distance yourself from this Eurocentric nonsense, You start to get a perspective of who you really are and the relevance of yourself and the reality of your skin and the reality of your beauty and the reality of your reality. Once you understand that it's been framed contextually in a system of oppression to keep us down there and to keep the others up there in terms of racial demarcation and white supremacy. That's exactly what it's designed to do. To make you feel the way that you feel, so that you gravitate towards Eurocentric norms and values and abandon your own culture and your own people because it's deemed as inferior. And, we better move away from who we are naturally. And, we want to gravitate towards Eurocentricity. It's a trick, one of the most vile tricks of humanity that's been played on the African. And we play into its hands. We need to understand that we are beautiful people, that we are relevant. And reading and understanding the history from an Afrocentric perspective is the way to do so. Okay? So that we're not killing one another and stumbling over one another to try and be as European as we can be. It's okay. We're all right being African. Thank you. And embracing Afrocentricity. And there's no problem in embracing Eurocentric culture, but doing so from an Afrocentric perspective so that you know that you're, okay, we like that aspect of European culture, but not that we're investing in it because we need it desperately to define who we are so that we can feel better about ourselves. But okay, I like that blazer, or I like that shirt, or I like that food, and I'm going to sample that. But to do that from the perspective of being at one with yourself and comfortable with your African origins and who you are as an African is what you need to do. There's no problem in enjoying other cultures, but you can't, embrace other cultures at the expense of your own because you feel that you are in some way inferior. And in order to feel that you are a human being or that you are normal, that you need to gravitate to Eurocentric norms and values. Embrace them, embrace the positivities from every culture. That is our job as human beings, to embrace the positivity of all cultures, but not at the expense of your own, and really relegating your own culture to the pits. Because that's unreality. That's not what it is at all. Quite the opposite. Okay? African civilization is the origin of modern European civilization. Without the heights of African civilization, modern European civilization, as we have it now, would not exist. We are the origin, and the facts are there. And I'm not saying that as a form of African supremacy or black supremacy. I'm saying it as a fact, and I'm saying it so that we can put African civilization and African people within the context of which they deserve to be, because these are facts. This is not to say that we are superior to Europeans. This is just to say that we have our place in history. We have our place in history. Every culture has had heights at which it has been dominant. So to ignore the dominance of African culture when it was at its height, and the fact that it is the origin through African intelligence and the African mode of intelligence, modern civilization was born and has been adopted by other cultures around the world. We are the origin of modern civilization. And we need to understand that. And we need to understand within that context, black literally was beautiful. It wasn't just a slogan to try and make us feel better, some vacuous construct. It was reality, absolute reality. Melanated skin was the epitome of beauty in its time. It is not now, because we are in European time and we see things through European time. That is the European past, present and future, which contextualizes Afrocentricity, African people, and sees it as negative in order to keep the power play, the power dynamics within white hands. It's quite simple. And it's a trick of the highest order. So we need to get ourselves together and understand that we exist within a matrix, a simulated reality of which Africans are seen as lesser and Europeans are seen as higher. And we need to understand that that is something that has been coded through the lengthy ramblings and the bombardment of information from European and white supremacist sources to make black people seem and to feel inferior to whites. And it is a trick of the highest order. It is no basis in reality. And I think that is a really pertinent point that I wanted to push home based on what I've been reading recently. And I think that is really something that we need to get our heads around, so that we can have pride and in who we are, and draw comfort and draw comfort and power from who we are, and be comfortable in who we are, and use that as a trajectory to move forward and to elevate our people. Good evening.